Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast, presented by Not Your Mother's Radio. Today's guest is Johnny Echols. Johnny was born in Memphis. He moved with his family to Los Angeles in the late 1950s, and re-established a childhood friendship with L.A.G, who had also moved to the city from Memphis. Echols began playing guitar as a child, and in his teens played in bands with Billy Preston, Marilyn McCoo, Clarence McDonald, and others. Echols and Lee both attended Dorsey High School and decided to form a band. The band became L.A.G and the L.A.G before splitting up. Lee and Echols then formed the American Four, later renamed the Grassroots, and finally renamed Love in 1965. The rest, as they say, is history. We are listener funded, and if you would be kind enough to assist, our PayPal info is notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. That's notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. Any contributions would be appreciated and will of course help us keep the show running.
Johnny, how you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's everybody knows the history of love and all that stuff. I mean, we'll talk about it a little more in detail, but let's hear about you now. What are you doing now? What are your plans now that we're at a semi-normal again?
Okay, we're in the middle of getting together to do a European UK tour starting in June of 2022. So it requires a lot of pre-planning and all of that, and that's what we're doing right now. It'll be a 6-week tour, and so far we have, I think, 20 dates, and we're still adding others. And so that's where I'm at right now, and I'm also working on a book called Just Another Day in the Life, and it speaks to my experiences with love, but also before with Little Richard and Jimi Hendrix and the Doors and people like that. So I've got a full plate.
Yeah, you do. Now, you were on the Elektra label with the Doors.
Correct.
And I've had a couple of conversations with Ravi, and I know the Doors are a big fan of Love's.
Yeah, we're fans of theirs. As a matter of fact, we got them their recording contract.
That's right. And Holtzman, obviously the man who ran the label, was a big fan of Love's. I know he, first of all, Love was a great band. So you guys are going on tour, and the guys in the band, are they the Baby Lemonade still?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
They've been playing with us in some form since 1992. So of course they've been with the group longer than any incarnation of Love. And they know this music absolutely better than anybody. I mean, when we play live, it just sometimes I have to just stop and listen because they sound so good.
Really? Mm-hmm. And your European tour, I'm assuming you're going to hit the UK?
Correct.
And
and Ireland and Scotland, and so the whole of the UK.
Great.
We're working on Wales as well.
Okay. And you, Love was probably bigger in the UK than you are here, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, you guys were gods in the UK. Now I'm older than a lot of our listeners, so I remember Love. I was young, but I remember when you were responsible for. I think you did 3 or 4 co-writing credits on the first album, right?
Correct. That's how we're credited, but actually, how music is written, someone will come in with an idea and say, and then everybody puts their input forward. But,
sure. But one of the greatest tunes on the album, Can't Explain, was partially yours, Mushroom Clouds, and the classic And More.
Yes, and also Emotions, which was called Lonely Guitar before.
Right, and Emotions. So Love was a tough band to be in, right? It wasn't an easy gig.
No, it wasn't, because we had so many talent. Bryan and Arthur were both, I consider Bryan more so, but Arthur and Bryan were geniuses. Real, and they were both bipolar. Right. So clinically bipolar. together. So it was tough dealing with them because the mood swings were just astonishing. We'd go from one moment laughing and talking and having a good time to this darkness and the world's going to end in 5 minutes, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I know my mother was bipolar.
Yeah, so then
And you never know which person you're coming in to see that day.
That's correct.
And it was really, I know as a kid it was tough because, if you knew you had a rotten parent, you knew she was always rotten, but sometimes it was like an angel waiting for you. So you
That's
never,
correct.
so you never knew what was going on. But I think I think most geniuses have some type of an issue with something.
That's correct. Yeah.
So but besides that, you guys were like the bad boys of rock.
Yeah, I guess so. We had our share of, I guess, indiscretions.
Yeah,
I'll put it that way. But yeah, we were kids.
Yeah, I know. We're not going to get into any of that stuff because all that stuff's been spoken about and written about, and it's out there. So growing up with Arthur, you guys knew each other in Memphis.
Correct.
And then you both wound up on the West Coast. And you were in the L.A.G band. Correct.
That was the Los Angeles group. It was our version of Booker T and the MGs. So
It was instrumental. And from there, you guys went on to eventually, put together the Grassroots band, which obviously there was another Grassroots band, and the whole bit, which led to you and Arthur putting together Love.
Correct.
Now, Love was a pretty interesting band because it was, when you didn't see too much of it in rock bands, it was, first of all, it was led by a black frontman.
Mm-hmm.
And just the black and white thing back then wasn't, it wasn't, it was a unique presence.
Yes, it was.
And you guys.
The thing was, we wanted to reflect the reality in which we lived, which was a biracial, diverse group of people, our families and friends. So we wanted our group to reflect that.
Right.
And it wasn't easy because Love would have been a lot bigger in this country had we been able to play in places in the South, which we couldn't play, and many places in Middle America as well. So
and California, up in the Oakland, San Francisco area, the interracial thing was a little more prevalent. You had Santana, you had War, you had Tower of Power, you had all that stuff. So, but in L.A. it was definitely unique.
Yeah, I think that's what kind of sparked the interest in us, is because of the fact that we were a mixed race group, and the kids that came to see us, we were kind of safe, dangerous. We were like them, but we were also black, but we spoke like they did, and we dressed like they did. So they came to see that, wow, there's not really a hell of a lot of difference other than melanin.
No, and you guys sounded more like a Caucasian type band than an interracial band. You played straight ahead rock and roll, which later developed into, for lack of a better term, a neoclassical, with Alone Again, and you set the scene. Were more of a, had more of a classical feel, maybe pre-prog, for just if you had to kind of put it on a shelf. So you guys were definitely unique, and you were a great band, and you had the three main people in the band were you, Arthur, and Bryan, and you had three very, very talented guys, and was there a big ego thing? Was there a clash of egos?
Yes, there was, between Bryan and Arthur. Between myself, I was kind of in the middle, trying to keep these two, as I mentioned before, about their situations, and trying to kind of ameliorate situations. And Bryan wanted more of his music on this. Was a constant battle to get more of his songs on the albums, and it was kind of difficult at times because of the fact that you have really two supremely talented individuals, and they are very headstrong and trying to put this together. And a functioning business, which a group is, people don't sometimes realize it's fun playing music and you're doing what you love, but it's a business. And if you don't handle your business, you won't be playing long, because that was our only means of support, is playing music. So
Yeah.
we had to, and also being biracial and diverse as we were, as I mentioned before, there were so many places in this country that we couldn't play. So we were basically relegated to a West Coast thing and an East Coast thing, and the rest of the country in between, except for that one time we played the Texas Convention Center, Dallas Convention Center rather, and we played a pop festival in Miami, and that was it for the South, nowhere else.
Yeah, because I don't think anybody knew that there wasn't an all Caucasian band. It didn't sound like it, and there really wasn't, FM radio at the time ever discussed it. Here's love, boom, and they would play, a love tune, and I think people were kind of surprised when they found out that it was biracial.
Yes, it was surprising to them and the promoters, because many times the promoters didn't know, and then we got to Georgia once. And we get off the plane, and they had sent the limo to pick us up. And the guys, yeah, they take us over, and we meet the promoter. And all of a sudden, there was a problem, and the gig was canceled because he thought through me. Yeah, so we had to, it was he did, of course, have the decency to pay for our plane trips back home. So it wasn't like we were out of money, but. That kind of thing happened often with us, because either we would get there and they'd cancel the gig, or they'd find out prior to our arrival and the gig was canceled. Because, you look at it this way. This was the time of turmoil. We were having civil rights struggles, the war in Vietnam, and you're having people voting rights, people trying to vote and having dogs and fire hoses put upon them. So with that as a backdrop, you have to think, well, it's not so surprising that a bunch of interracial race mixing California hippies would not necessarily be welcome in that environment, coming from the South.
A lot of crackers down there at the time.
Yeah.
And it's not much different now, though.
No, actually, it's probably getting worse, because now with a certain individual, he has made it okay to have biases and to actually speak to those biases, whereas before you kind of hid them, and now it's out in the open. People say exactly what they think and tell you who they are. So.
And it's scary. I happen to be Jewish, and so it's not as obviously people know if you're African American, if you're Black, 6 feet away. I think when they find out that I'm Jewish, they kind of feel like I was holding out on them and didn't tell them on purpose. That kind of thing, So it's an awful time to be involved in this, especially us older guys, us older hippie type guys, fought for this in the '60s, and we thought we had that under control, and in a matter of days it was taken away.
Yeah, it's more and more so. And we may, if we don't find some way to figure it out, especially as far as voting is concerned, we may just be in a one party kind of almost fascist type of situation.
Well,
I don't want to say fashion, I don't like throwing those words.
Well, I think we're in the middle of a civil war.
Yeah, that's definitely.
And nobody's calling it a civil war yet, but we're there.
Yeah, we're there. And the other side has been arming themselves for years, and they're ready to go. They've had these militias. And, so
plus, the police are on their side, the military is on their side, and we're pretty much screwed. But
that's the way I feel, and so I'm happy that I'm older now, so I don't have to live a long time to deal with this.
I am too, but my grandkids live with me. I have 2 young grandkids living with me, and I feel bad for them. Yeah, because they're going to have to see the real, the real product of what's being produced now, and that's pretty scary. So let's get back to fun stuff. Are you doing any new music? Any new stuff coming up?
Yeah, also, besides working on the book, I'm also working on an album of material that we had started back in the day. And then it took, Arthur got married and having to deal with his estate and people that had really nothing whatsoever to do with our group. Now
Right.
they've insinuated themselves into my business. So it's trying to get the clearances and all of that for our own music is sometimes difficult, but
Now,
working it out.
Forever Changes, there was talk about that being a double album,
Correct.
and you had lost a lot of your tunes were supposed to be included in the album that weren't.
Correct. And
And
Brian's as well.
yeah, and Brian's as well. And there was supposed to be a companion album, and that never surfaced. Is there any chance of that ever seeing the light
Yeah,
of
that's
day?
what I was speaking to.
That's the one you were
Gethsemane
talking about.
Project. Yes. I'm
Okay,
trying to
great.
get those songs together. So
And same title on that, or is it being changed?
it's called Gethsemane.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
that was our, there was so much turmoil and stuff happening around the recreation and the recording of Forever Changes that we thought Gethsemane would be a proper title. It was one of the most monumental betrayals in all of history.
and the talk is that missing album is phenomenal. Just incredible
is.
music on it.
Yes, it is. And if I can ever release it and get everybody together on the same page, it will be surprising because it takes off from where Forever Changes left off.
Uh-huh.
And we did one of the songs called You're Mine and We Belong Together. That was one of these songs that would have been on the Gethsemane Project. And so you get to hear where we were going. And then we were going to kind of a jazz, blues, rock fusion is kind of what we're doing with a little bit of kind of classical things.
Uh-huh. And I heard it was a little funkier than
yes. So it was really it's a very, very good sounding, very, very actually it seems more appropriate now because it kind of speaks to the time in which we're living right now, more so than Forever Changes did. So it's almost a prescient album, it's kind of, we saw what was happening and where it was going, and we've actually gotten there.
Cool. So yeah, and I'm a believer that things happen for a reason, that things come to fruition when they're supposed to.
Correct. I believe the exact same thing.
Okay.
And this is so neat of traveling and playing music now, because back in the day when we would go to Europe or play in places, we would likely stay in the hotel. We would play the gig, go back to the hotel, and then go to the plane. And now with my wife and I, we get to enjoy the scenery. We get to be tourists. We get to meet the people that buy our records, and and it's so much fun. And then meeting the grandchildren of the people that bought our records back in the day is really it's priceless. I love it so much.
That's
and these
great.
young people are really into this music, which is amazing. But they know the songs and they sing along when we're playing on stage. They will sing in or mouth the words with us. It's beautiful.
Well, I'm glad. I'm really happy that you're happy, because I think of anybody who should keep the legacy of love going, it should be you, because you always looked like the middleman, the guy who was in the middle of two forces, and you were kind of like the glue that kept it together.
Yeah.
And that was always the impression I had. And I don't know, it just the persona that the band had, that it was always ready to implode, and it was a struggle to keep it above water.
And that was the magic of it, because there was always this, you just never knew what was going to happen. So it gave us that special appeal.
And you were lucky enough to find a Baby Lemonade.
Correct. Yeah.
And I have a couple of their albums, the stuff that they did, pretty interesting stuff. But I remember it must have been prior. Well, Arthur was still in the band, so it had to be probably early '80s. You guys played New York, and I remember seeing you guys, and I guess it was Baby Lemonade. I didn't know at the time, and the shows are incredible. They really were. And
These gentlemen can play. They are really consummate musicians, but they also understand, so they don't try to pretend to be love. They're people that respect and revere the music of love. And they
yeah,
give people the space to understand that you're hearing music that was created by several other people, but it's created in such a way and done in such a way that you really don't know if you closed your eyes, because Rusty, he does the singing on most of the songs,
yeah.
whereas I'll do the doubling like on 7-7 is, or
Uh-huh.
My Little Red Book. You're hearing both of our voices. So when you hear that, you really don't know you're not listening to the same group from back in the day. But Rusty does a magnificent job of recreating that, the
Yes.
vocals that are for there.
And I think, not to take anything away from the love musicians, but you guys had a lot of problems back then. And I think the musicianship live now is probably a little more fluent than it was when the actual love band was on the road. First of all,
Of course.
yeah, equipment's gotten a hell of a lot better.
But then also you have to think back then, love, when we were doing it, I had just turned 16 when we signed with Elektra. So, now I'm 70. So you have to look at it. We don't play better now than we did then.
Yeah.
Then we shouldn't be playing at
No,
all.
no. But I'm just saying the guys who came in to fill the missing musicians are all top-notch guys, and they're all, and you guys are serious. I mean, you were serious, but again, you were kids back then. So
now we're full-grown adults. And
yeah. I mean, a lot of stupid things got in the way, and took away from some of the playing. Like I understand on Forever Changes, there was a time when studio guys were brought in because the band was in trouble, and you guys had to get the record out.
Yeah, the reason that I kind of alluded to that before is Bryan, we had expected this to be a double album. Get to the studio, things changed. And so all of the songs that we worked on all of that time were no longer going to be on this album. They would be on another one. That's what we were told. So Bryan was basically, he had a minor mutiny. He wouldn't play Arthur's songs the way he normally would. And the little things, that little touches that he added were not there. And so he was kind of pouting. And so they brought in the guys from the Wrecking Crew, and they played one song, and they realized that this isn't going to work. These guys are consummate musicians, but they don't sound like the group they're supposed to sound like. They don't sound like Love at all.
Right.
And so Elektra came in and offered us quite a bit more money and promised that we would do an album later, and also promised Bryan a solo album. And that was the way they got us back into the studio to finish the project.
Okay.
But
and it turned out to be one of the classic rock albums of all time.
yes, I agree.
Yeah, in fact, I was listening to it the other day. I knew I could be talking to you today, and that album could have been made last week.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds so fresh, and I know it's been remastered and everything else, and with all the bonus stuff. But the original album of Forever Changes is a classic. It's just, it's the sound. It's a time machine. It brings you back to that time and place.
Absolutely. And the thing that's neat is it's because of the younger generation that have discovered this music, and we, just a couple of years ago, before the world went crazy with this virus, we drew close to 100,000 people in Sefton Park. So this is way more than the original Love ever hoped to draw. So this incarnation is doing much better than the original group, which is amazing.
Plus you're together longer than the original group.
Oh yeah, of course. So,
which is kudos there. I mean, that's an incredible feat. It just that you pretty much a band continuing. This is this lineup's been together the longest of any Love lineup.
Yes, from '92, so it's a long time.
And so is Baby Lemonade and the New Love. So let's call them New Love. Are you guys going to be doing anything besides the the Missing Forever Changes album?
Yeah, we did a couple of songs. There are a couple of singles that will be released before we go on the tour in the summer of 2022. So yeah, we've been at it and doing music, new music, and that is not related to the, things that we have done in the past. So,
Great.
and it's good. I'm enjoying it.
And are you touring with anybody? Anybody could be on the road with you? Any support act?
And normally we travel alone, but we from time to time play with the Seeds,
Okay.
and sometimes we played with Robbie and his kid, his son. But normally we just tour alone and play with some of the local groups. Like in Sefton Park, a lot of the people that claimed influence by Love, like Echo and the Bunnymen and people from that genre, played with us. So most of the time, as I mentioned, we play it. We headline the tour, but they bring in supporting acts.
Great. And so that's going to be happening in 2022, June. So yes, you guys have some time before you have to start getting your act together, huh?
Yeah, we'll be playing. We just played last week in San Diego, and the week before that we did San Francisco and the festival in Big Sur, and then another one in San Luis Obispo. So we're on the road quite a bit.
Okay, so that's great. So are there any acts now that you're listening to that you personally want to endorse, that you could say, this is a new band and I really, really dig them?
Yeah, there's a group called Pop Vision. That's a strange name, but these young people are really, really, really good. And I got to know them personally, and I listened to them quite a bit. And some of I like jazz, so I listen to some of the jazz music and find myself kind of going back. I love early Miles, and I love Bob Dylan, But as I mentioned, just a couple of younger groups that are performing now, I will listen to, but I'm mostly old school.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I listen to a lot of jazz as well, and a lot of my friends and guys I speak to are, older jazz guys. I'm pretty friendly with the old Motives of Invention.
Yeah, Frank was my neighbor back in the day, so we lived right, on Lookout Mountain, and he was just a couple doors down from me. So
cool.
I knew Frank well.
Yeah, I speak to Bunk and Don a lot. Bunk Gardner, Don Preston, and Ian Underwood, who pretty much were the from the original band. I speak to them often, and I know you guys did something. Love was involved with them somehow, right?
Well, we had the same management, Herb Cohen.
Yeah, Herb. Yeah.
And we did some playing with them when we were playing at the Whiskey, and that's. But as I said, we were neighbors, and so we hung out together. And, so it's I love French music.
And you guys.
I did with Ike Willis. We did. He was on one of the tours we did a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I'm friendly with Ike as well. So you guys were involved in the whole Laurel Canyon scene, right?
Correct. Yeah, they've done a bunch of documentaries lately.
Yeah,
and we were on one, Legends of the Canyon, and another one.
What can you tell me about Laurel Canyon? That was it really as I mean, a lot of art, a lot of talent came from there, but that whole military thing, was that real? Was that imagined?
I think a lot of that was because, like, David Crosby was a good friend, and his father was in the military, as was Jim Morrison. I think his father was somewhere at one of the muckety mucks in the Navy. But other than that, knowing people whose parents were involved, we were not involved in anything militarily at all, because we were doing our best not to be drafted into that war. So, but the people in Laurel Canyon, for some reason, there's just one space and time. All of these musicians live within, a couple of doors of each other. Like I said, the Doors lived there. Down the street from me and Frank Zappa and the people in the Turtles and the Iron Butterfly and the Buffalo Springfield, we all lived within just a couple of blocks of each other. Now, there was a reason for that. It was because a musician could actually support himself on the salary of a working musician back there, because you could find a place in Laurel Canyon for $80, $90 a month, a nice house, and that same house is going for like several thousand a month now. But for that one, I don't know why all of a sudden it was just they call it white flight, I think, and they were moving out of that area and moving to the suburbs, and so those houses in Laurel Canyon were vacant and were available very, very cheap.
Yeah, because I know the whole thing is everybody's talking about Mama Katz's family came from the service, and Frank Zappa's father was in chemical something with the service, and Graham Parsons, everybody's father or somebody was involved with either political or military. And
I've heard about those, but as I say, we never really, because David never, I didn't even know about David's dad or Jim's dad until Jim had died. Then I found out his father had been in the military. So it wasn't like something that was on everyone's mind.
Well, here's one for you too. I used to work with Flo and Eddie, the Turtles. Well, when they left the Mothers, and Howard Kalin.
Yeah.
Howard's cousin is Herb Cohen.
That I didn't know.
Yeah, his second cousin or something, and they were related. That's how Howard got out of the service.
We got out by doing the same thing everybody did, just staying up late for like 3 or 4, or staying all night and going down to the place a mess and not following directions, which and so they sent us home.
Well, Herb supposedly guided him through that whole process. Take a lot of drugs before you go, the whole bit, that kind of thing. And
Herb had been in the military. That was one of our bones of contention with him, because he thought, the war was perfectly fine.
No. I understand Herb was selling military weapons.
Yeah, I think at some point he did do that. Yeah. So he was an interesting character, but how he got involved with us is just weird, because he was just there one day and asked if he could introduce us to a friend of his who owned the record company, and that was Jack Holtzman. And Jack came down from New York and heard us and gave us his pitch. And he was the only, we had been offered deals with several record companies, and MCA and Capital in particular, but they would not allow us to own the publishing. And we had established our own publishing company, and we wanted to own our music. And that was from Little Richard. He always says, "Child, you better own your own music. Don't let them take your music from you." And so that was something that we took to heart, and we made certain, and we still do, own the publishing to our songs, which has allowed us to live a very good life. Because Alone Again and 7 Is, those songs have been covered literally countless times. And done in movies and commercials. So that advice from Little Richard was prescient.
Wow, you set the scene.
Yeah.
This is stuff that just God, I can't think of that whole time period without those 3 love tunes that we just discussed. And Hey Joe, you guys did a great version of that. I know that was Brian's from his Bird days.
Correct.
And My Little Red Book, the Burt Bacharach tune. You guys just were incredible. What an incredible band. And I'm assuming you do all that stuff on the road now.
Oh yeah, we do them all, except for Hey Joe. We don't do that much, but we do just about all the other songs.
Wow. Are you going to be touring the States outside of California?
Yeah, we will be probably doing some warm-up shows before. We've been asked to come to all places to North Carolina. There's some festival happening there in May, so we're thinking of doing that if we can work it out before, it's kind of getting a warm-up, before we go on tour of Europe and the UK. So, but as we play often, just about every week or every other week, we're playing somewhere in this area. It's easier for us to get around, especially now that the COVID things are lifting. So we go and play here in Portland.
I have friends who live in Norway who have jazz bands actually, and they were touring for the last 2-3 months, and they said that they see problems in the future, that they see it coming back, and people are starting to get wary again, and more people are getting sick, and it's scary. When is this thing going to go away and leave us alone?
Yeah, the thing is, most of the gigs that we have, and we're playing again in a couple of weeks here at the Federal in Burbank, and they have, before they, when they get the tickets, they have to show a legitimate vaccine card, and they have to have had at least one shot, and preferably two, or they don't get in the door. And we played in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, and they blocked off the street because we had so many pre-sales that it was called the chapel. This used to be a church. Sure. And there were so many people that wanted to come out that they got permission to block the street off. And so they had tables and waiters and people out in the middle of the street. So that was really cool.
Listening to new music now, the stuff that's out, that's popular now, do you think a band like Love would have been able to get a deal, get a recording contract?
I think so, because we were eclectic, and so we could go from jazz to blues to rock to classical. So we would find some little niche that would allow us to be heard, but it would be difficult. But and we were consummate musicians after a point, so I think we would have figured out a way to be relevant.
I mean, we were so lucky to be involved and to have been able to listen to the music back in the day. I mean, there's guys out there now that probably most of Herb Cohen's catalog would never be able to work now. Between Tom Waits and those, I just can't see him. I mean, I love Tom and I think he's incredible, but I can't see the people. I don't know if people in today's day would have seen any type of commercial, and everything's the commercial end of it now. That nothing has to do with art anymore.
Yeah.
And it's really sad, because I think so much of the great artists are being overlooked because they can't dance, or they or they don't look perfect behind the camera, and that's not music.
No, it's not. But I don't know if we necessarily would have been out of time. I think we would have found a place. That's hopefully we would have. But then it's kind of hard to say what would have been. But because we would have still been playing music, that was our life. So.
But you guys had a good-looking band.
Yes, I think we did. That was the thing. They called us chick magnets. That was the phrase. But that was, fortunately, people came together that the ladies liked, and that was our main audience initially. And then the guys would come because so many young ladies were there. And that's how we would get just huge crowds because of that. Kind of fed off of it.
And you guys had both. You had people of color and Caucasians. You had something for everybody in that band. So are there any stories that you want to share about those days with Love?
Well, that I don't know if I have any stories that I can tell at this point, but I'm putting these things in a book, so I don't know if my stories would be appropriate. Right. But they are going to be interesting, and getting clearances, because a lot of the people that are involved are no longer here, and you have to get permissions from their estates to tell stories about certain things that happen that are not flattering to certain individuals, I suppose.
Okay, when you were trying to get your record deal, you said Capitol was interested.
Correct. Yeah.
Did you remember who you were dealing with at Capitol?
Well, the people from Beachwood Music, they had a thing with Capo, so it would have been Adam Ross and Jack Levy from Beachwood Music, because we had, before we became Love, Arthur and I had recorded with them, and we had left and then talked to a guy named Buck Ram. He was the manager of the Platters, and we had gone to school with Billy Preston, so the first group we had was with Billy, and Arthur wasn't in that group. So people that from that gospel thing. Jackie Goober was one of them, and they were trying to cross over into rock. So we had a lot of interest, but as I say, the people, none of the major companies except for Elektra would allow us to own our masters and own the publishing. Which,
because before I spoke to you today, I spoke to Artie Kornfeld.
Mhm.
Artie was a vice president of rock music at Capitol. And he's the guy who's put together Woodstock with Michael Lang. And I'm a friend of Artie's. We were just talking to kind of just, catch up a bit. And I told him I was speaking to you today, and he just wants me to send his regards and tell you what a big fan he was of Love. That he thought it was a great band. But yeah, I mean, such an iconic band that kind of flew right under the radar until you guys brought it back to life. I think you guys are bigger now than you are.
Yeah, absolutely, which is amazing. And, we have a younger audience because most of our people are, transitioned, but
Yeah.
we have a younger audience and they know these songs and they know the words. And it's just amazing. I love that so much, just to sit there and watch while we're doing it and watch them singing along with us.
Yeah. Now, I know this is a hard question, but some people thought that maybe Bryan should have been the front man of that band. You have any feedback on that?
Well, Bryan was a genius at putting together songs, but the thing was, we had to rework a lot of Bryan's songs because they just did not have the thing that kind of commercialism that, as commercial as we were, which wasn't very much, but to be played on the radio or done on albums. Bryan was mostly into like show tunes and chocolate colored rainbows and this kind of stuff. And his songs were very, very, very Pollyanna-ish. Anyway, so it was kind of rough. I think it would have been if Bryan was the front man. And I don't think Arthur would have stood for it.
No. Arthur was a great front man.
Yeah. But these guys worked off each other, and that was cool because the thing is, if you listen to many of our songs, they talk about the relationship and the rivalry between Arthur and Bryan. Like the song "A My Love, Be My Love, So Hard to Choose," or "Stephanie Knows Who." They're talking about the same girl. They both wound up dating the same girls, and they were continually at loggerheads. And it was sometimes friendly and sometimes not so friendly.
Yeah, no good could come from dating the same girl.
But it was something that helped. It worked. This rivalry worked with us, and as long as we could keep them from hurting each other, everything was fine. But sometimes it would get to blows between the two of them.
Then eventually Bryan went into the non-secular music world.
Correct. Yeah, he became a born-again Christian, and he was doing Christian music. And we didn't talk a hell of a lot during that period because he was proselytizing an awful lot and trying to convert people that were unconvertible. And I'm one of those people that you cannot convert because I have my own ideas about that.
Me too.
For the most part,
Yep.
Not there.
And it's really funny. Not funny, just real interesting how many of the artists that we kind of nurtured with are getting into that field. I spoke to Carmine Appice the other day from the Vanilla Fudge. He's getting into that mainstream, as well as got everybody. The guys who are left from Badfinger and Rick Derringer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's just it's scary because getting too involved in any one thing is, once you become a fanatic, it gets scary.
Yeah, and many of them have gone further to the right. Now, I understand that because there's a tremendous amount of money to be made at playing at these CPACs and all of these conservative things, because they seem to want to rub it in the faces of people on the left by hiring people like this to come and basically they're tokens that are put out front and paid substantial amounts of money to play. And I don't know if they have actually gone in that direction or they're doing it just strictly because of the finances involved. But
I know.
yeah, I know so many people that have done
I know.
that.
Yep. And you know, it's kind of depressing because we kind of were all in the same army at one time, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And it just kind of fractured off into, you know, craziness on one side, craziness on the other side. And it's just a rotten world we live in now, which is damn, you know, it's kind of sad. Because I thought by this time it would all be over. We'd all be hugging and kissing, and color wouldn't matter, and religion wouldn't
Something is
matter.
going to have to happen to change it, because we can't do this forever, because we will have a real civil war. And
Yeah.
our side, you know, my side cannot win because we don't have the resources, the guns and all of the things that these people seem to have, and they've been stockpiling them for decades. So,
No, I know. So when Bryan left the band, was that because of his solo deal? He thought he was going to be doing solo work.
it was that was the thing. See, nobody knew about that. We didn't know that Jack Holtzman had worked out this arrangement with Bryan in order to get him to come back and do forever changes properly. So Bryan sprung this on us, and it turns out that while we were working in the studio and touring, they had been working basically behind our backs. So when Bryan pointed out that he just signed a solo deal with Elektra, he wasn't leaving the group, but he wanted to do his own thing because we weren't really getting behind many of his songs. It wasn't taken very well. And Arthur, even though Bryan was signed with us and he couldn't really fire him, he fired him, and Bryan just accepted that. I mean, he could have protested, and of course, we would have voted and kept Bryan in the group because, you know, Kenny, myself, Arthur, and I, we own the franchise. And so if we wanted to, we could have overridden Arthur and said, no, we want to keep Bryan. But no, we didn't. I was happy to see him go, frankly, because the doing forever changes was hard on us. And there were a lot of hard feelings that I don't think ever were mended. And so seeing Bryan go wasn't, you know, a negative to me until he actually left. And then we tried performing As Love without Bryan, and it just didn't sound the same. It didn't feel the same on stage. So it just didn't work. And so we ended up going our separate ways, you know, permanently. But
Okay, I have one question, and then I want to get into your studio work. Gary Rowells, did you work with Gary?
yes, yes. He had played that. This was with Arthur's incarnations of, you know, when it was Arthur Lee and Love, it's entirely different than the group Love. So Gary worked with him.
And Gary, that's the same Gary that wound up in the Flo&Eddie band.
Yeah, yeah, he played with
Mark and Howard.
And yeah.
Okay, and yeah, he actually had issues too. He had deep depression, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, we won't get into his story, but it didn't end up. Wasn't a good ending. So you went back to New York. Not went back to New York. You're not a New Yorker, but you wound up in New York, and you're in the studio with guys like Miles.
Correct. Well, actually, Miles was just a personal friend. So when he was on his hiatus, I hung out with him, and because he wanted to be a rock star more than anything, which was weird. I loved him for his jazz, old school jazz, but he wanted to go in another direction. So I hung with him then, and we were working on a project that never came to fruition. In Washington Square, there would be these drum circles, you know, people beating on trash can lids or whatever, and just making that sound. And Miles wanted to bring those guys into the studio and actually play with it. But these were untrained musicians that are just basically just playing, and they didn't understand that you have to leave room for a soloist and room for Miles to play, which they didn't. And it was felt that if we tried to train them to leave room and to actually be trained musicians, then it would defeat the whole purpose. So it just never came to fruition. But a couple of times we went to Washington Square and just stood there and played it with all these guys, just, people that'll just wandered around making noise. And it was sort of interesting, but it was, I could see that it couldn't go anywhere.
Right. So what other studio work did you do? Who were you involved with?
Oh gosh, I did mostly the studio work we were doing. Especially the last few years was for Japanese radio. This was the best gig I ever had. We're playing just blues. All they wanted was a blues, stream of consciousness blues all day. So every day we went into the studio and worked 4 or 5 hours, and we just did countless just jams basically. And they would use them for lead-ins for radio shows there and commercials. So there are many of them. If you go to Japan, you probably will hear us on some radio program or some of their advertisements for something.
Remember any of the guys you played with who's in the bands with you?
This would have been, oh gosh, the people that I played with, basically, they were not well-known people.
Yeah,
they were just,
yeah.
consummate studio musicians.
The old studio cat. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because well, what years were that? What
This would have been around between 74 and 79, and I left and moved to Sedona and then moved back to Los Angeles. So it would have been between 73, 74, and 79.
That was still early in your career.
Yeah, it was still early, but I had to get away from Los Angeles because things were getting dark for me and I needed to get away. So
good. And you I know you went through issues and you put yourself together, and I mean, it's a great story. Your life would make a great movie.
Well, I don't know that. It's been interesting anyway. I've had some ups and a few downs, but I've enjoyed my life, and I would trade places with anyone.
Good.
Being able to make a living, and a very good living playing music is just a blessing in itself. I'm using blessing in the non-religious term. Just it's been, the universe has just bestowed us with a gift, and that gift was to be able to live my life the way I wanted to, and to live well playing music.
Great. And so we know where you came from, we know where you're going, and is there any parting words you'd like to tell people? If just any words of wisdom that musicians could live by?
Well, if there's any wisdom, it's that we need to try and figure out a way to get along with each other, because we are at a point, and it's so polarized in this country now, that people that were friends now because of some political, I have friends that I've known for decades that I can't talk to anymore. And it's sad, and it doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense, because when you listen to the reasoning behind this kind of the dissension that we're having, it's nonsense. They're talking about one group of people being lizard people and living off the blood of babies and this kind of crazy nonsense. But you would think this is absurd. Why would anybody believe this? And these are people that I hung with, people that can tie their shoes and, and have relationships, and they believe this madness.
I know you say to yourself, how do these guys breathe? Are they smart enough to breathe?
It's astonishing that we've come to this place, and it's frightening, and I don't see how there's going to be a way out of it unless a meteor or something from outer space comes and devastates this planet or hits us or something. We're going to need. I thought COVID would do it, but COVID isn't doing it. It's just polarizing us even more. So something has to bring us together, or we are doomed as a country. Maybe just split up into provinces.
And we came from that generation that was fixing all this.
Yeah, well, it's obviously we're doing a piss poor job, because we're going in the wrong direction.
Yes, we are. We really are. I know it's same thing. I have people I can't talk to anymore, and family members. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
And you can understand. I mean, these older Caucasian guys worried that they're losing, their power, their grip on society. But how about people of color who follow that whole right-wing thing, or Jewish people who follow that whole right-wing thing? We're the targets.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot understand it, and I can't figure it out. As you mentioned, I can understand because the demographics in this nation are changing. And at some point, the majority population will no longer be the majority population. And it's not easy just to give up power and to give up, and they call it the privileges and perks and all of that a specific group has had, but that is real. I remember, this was just a short story. My wife and I were living in Chicago. This was before we got married. And there was this really neat apartment in London. And I went in to get the apartment, and the man said, no, it's not for rent. And I thought, what the hell? And I let my wife go in, and of course it was for rent, and she was able to rent the place. So you think of the stuff that happened back then, and it's still happening, only it's getting worse and it's getting more out front. So
that's funny. I lived in Chicago in 1975 and 76. I got married when I was living in Chicago, and I remember when they found out we were Jewish, some of the people asked us if they could see our tails.
Yeah.
And this was in the mid 70s. This wasn't in this wasn't in 1812. And it's scary because
it's just normal. You think regular people that, as I said, can have relationships, tie their shoes, hold down a job, but they also believe it's nonsense.
Yeah.
And why? Where is it? If you've got a brain, any brain cells, it would tell you that most of this crap is just from some fool just sitting around making stuff up in the internet. I think I blame the internet for everything, because I used to make a hell of a lot more money before you could just download our stuff for free.
I know.
So, but yeah, it's a wonderful tool, but it's also a curse.
People want to use the internet for porn and leave everything else out of it. So we've some friends. We've some of the same friends. I know Robbie and John Altman.
Oh yeah, he's a good buddy of mine. We often see each other.
Yeah. So how do you? John had told me he was going to hook you up with me a year ago, and for some reason it never happened. I speak to John often, and that's when I got off my butt and said, I'm going to find Johnny on my own. Heck with it. And I'm glad I did. But John's an incredible guy, isn't he?
Yes, he is a wonderful musician. He's got some really cool stories.
Yeah.
John knows damn near everybody.
He knows everybody.
Yeah.
You could, you could just pull a name out of a hat, and John will tell you. He'll tell you a story about anybody. John will tell you a story about anybody. He, going back to Peter Green and Jimi Hendrix to Amy Winehouse. So how do you meet John? How are you involved with him?
Was a friend of ours, Warwick Rose, he's passed on. He would have these incredible parties where he'd invite these were all musicians, and he'd invite these. He had a mansion up in Bell Canyon in the Los Angeles area, and he'd invite all these musicians, and we were just disparate guys. He'd have maybe a rapper, and then he'd have someone that played bluegrass music and a jazz musician, and he put us all together, and we play. And that's how I met John, just playing at Warwick's gigs. And we started to come into each other's shows, and I would go and see John whenever he was appearing here. And he'd come when we were in England, or in Brighton, it's where he lives. He'd come and sit in with us. And so we just became good friends, just playing music together. And,
what a great guy.
I saw his resume, and I was just, floored by all the people he's played with.
It's scary, I know, and he's so humble.
Yeah,
he's so humble. It's like you would think he's just a guy down the block, but then you say to him, I'm thinking of maybe putting on a Van Morrison album. Oh, I arranged that album.
Yeah.
It's like, what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to listen to the Ruggles. Oh, I arranged that album.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go see the
That's-
movie. I'm gonna go see the movie Titanic. Oh, I did the music for that
Yeah,
one.
the music. That's why you love him so much, because he's unpretentious and he just matter of factly reads
Yeah.
off this just world-class resume.
Fly on the Wall podcast, presented by Not Your Mother's Radio, is listener funded. If you would be kind enough to assist, our PayPal info is notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. That's notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. Any contributions would be appreciated and will of course help us keep the show running.
And I'd like to thank you for spending the time with me today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
And I hope I knew more than the last guy you spoke to.
Oh man, we won't go there.
Okay, but yeah, no, I've been a fan for, you know, I've been a lover of love for, you know, a while, and I hate to say it for a long time because it makes me feel old, but I kind of grew up with your records, and I want to thank you for putting them out and for being involved in one of the greatest rock bands of all time. And
Well,
I
thank
hope,
you so much.
and I hope to see you in and I hope you get to New Mexico. If not, I'm going to come to LA and see you in LA. You got to let me know when you're playing.
Cool. Let me know and we'll find a spot for you.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, my friend, stay safe and stay well, and I'll let you know when we do our next show, and I'll let John know I spoke to you, and please, please, please stay safe out there.
Absolutely. You too. We'll speak soon.
Okay, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.